Thank you so much. Really nice to connect with all of you. You know, I know in terms of in the middle of a lot of sort of the tech stuff and all the new innovative stuff that you guys like to hear about. This one maybe is a little bit more sort of self-reflective, almost philosophical. But with all the work and things I've done or I do, I've been thinking, must be because of the pandemic, I'm not sure, but I very much resonate with what Emil was saying, and I'll come back to that as well. And I've been thinking about this idea behind meaning, and people talk about authenticity and all of that. So I don't want to get into my introduction, because what I want to speak to you in sort of my three life milestones also in a way becomes an introduction to some of the things that I've done. So for me, I start. I've done two TED talks, and one of them was in 2014, and their title completely. It's called "How I Fell in Love with the Burqa." But the second one, which I gave last year, which is something where my thinking was a bit prompted from that, was something that I call the Muslim heroine's journey, and I looked at it as my journey of transformation from 9/11 to up till now, and how a lot of that has changed. So for me, my family is from India. I grew up in Dubai, and I moved to London about 10 years ago. And in 2008, there was a terrorist attack on key Bombay landmarks. And I remember just sitting in Dubai in sort of this job, which I thought was my dream job, but sitting there really early in the morning, watching all of this unfold, so many unnecessary deaths, and just feeling this sense of anger. And I kept thinking about it, and I kept thinking, but surely anger is not really going to take us anywhere. And what it just led me to do was just start thinking. And I thought, this is a systemic issue. If it's, we can hate some of these guys who are carrying out these attacks, but at the end of the day, even if you get rid of them, you've actually not even touched the system. You've barely done a dent in that. And the only way to do that is, with all my thinking, I said, it's really boring, but it's only through education. Because if you give them the opportunity to have choices in life, then maybe they will make better choices instead of choosing to go and kill people and earn money out of it. And the only thing I could do at the time was the only thing in my hand. I went to the village where I originally come from in India, and I taught in a school for a week's time. And I did it gradually. I mean, I could only take a week off from work and things. And so I was sitting and thinking about, how do I sort of package that up? And I just called it the 8-day academy, because it was really wholesome week of learning. And that sort of got me started. I, reached my second kind of milestone, which was became part of the TEDx communities, the TED communities. And what I found when I started going to a lot of these events beyond TED as well is I would often be the only person in the room who looked like how I look like, basically, who's covered with this external sort of obvious elephant in the room, Muslim identity. And I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Hidden Figures. And it was about Black women and representation in NASA. And there's this one scene which always sort of sticks, which is, it's these women fighting for, you have the main office where it's just filled with white people, essentially white men. And these women who are doing key work, but relegated to some like corner of the campus somewhere far away. And, one of the characters says that if there's a Black girl who sees us here in this main room, the only thing she will know is that I can, like, this space has been cracked open for us. We can be part of this as well. And I've always believed, and I still believe, a lot of work that I did was cracking these spaces open for people that like us, or people who choose to look like us, or people who choose to look like really anything that they want to, which is different to whatever the mainstream sort of idea is. And for me, the quest for meaning started then. And it has evolved. There's some people who would love to do things because it's for money, and that's completely okay. But one of the things I've learned is you have these temporary goals essentially, but things that change. At a certain point in time, money is really great, but then you kind of make all that money and then you still feel like something is still not there, like it's missing. And I often think about what is it actually that drives you, and that sort of brings you to what the meaning behind all of this is. And it could be money, but often meaning for me is your absolute sort of underlying reason. And I think I may have gotten mine, maybe. And it's one of those things, it tricks you. Um, when I was doing the 8 Day Academy stuff, I used to think about how, yes, representation and, becoming voice for the voiceless and that kind of basic bullshit, which I realized much later. And now when I think about my entire experience, and moving to London was interesting, a lot of learning actually comes from not just how you perceive the world, but also about from how the world perceives you. I lived in London. I never knew my Muslimness was a thing until I moved to London. I became person of color when I moved to London, and it was never a thing in Dubai or even going to India, for example. I mean, when I go to India now, my Muslimness sticks out over there in completely different context. And it's really, for me, that was very interesting. And it put me on a different journey. And so lately, where my mind is at is over the last couple of years, I've realized that as a person of color, so if you'll notice, a lot of people who are activists are just people of color. At least I've met very, very few white people who tend to be activists for their culture or for whatever it is, culture, blah, 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 whatever thing that they believe in. And I always remember this quote, and I can't remember if it's Toni Morrison or if it's Zora Neale, but she talks about how racism is a distraction. We spend our life, and I started thinking about this, and I started thinking, post 9/11, I thought I was doing this because it's engagement and whatever, that I wrote so much, I spoke so much, I did podcasts and did the whole thing about kind of trying to bridge people's understanding of practicing Muslims versus whatever idea of terrorism that was going on. And all these years later, and I'm active on a lot of these online communities, all these years later, I started feeling that actually, like, none of the shit matters. People just want to believe what they want to believe. And I almost started feeling that all this was to waste. And the burden of, the burden of explaining ourselves, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. And it just, I have a new mantra basically. And some of my lately, like the projects and things I'm working on, the meetings for me are not about, they're not about the work in itself. The work is fine. I actually find it absolutely magnificent to notice how white people, white Americans, privileged Americans behave in meetings. And hashtag goals. I basically realized what I want to do with my life is live my life like a rich old white man. That's what I want to do. And I find it, so when I look at my entire journey from there, it comes down to something really simple, and it works differently for different people. It depends so much on how you were raised and all of that kind of stuff, and backgrounds and so on. And I realized for me, in the last 6 months or whatever of this pandemic starting, and I've done all the baking and I've done the cooking and I've done the gardening and I've done everything else to sort of stay sane. But what has always brought me a lot of joy is every time I've made any phone calls to people in the village and just had a conversation with them about just regular things. And I realized for me how deeply important it is to sort of belong to the village in a different way. I think for me, being rooted, I've never lived there, but I think a lot of my rootedness comes from there. And I think about meaning, and and now I think that if you look at it as a video game, I think ultimately for me, it is about how can you be good every day. And this, I don't know, I didn't know how to make it less hippie. to be honest with you, but I thought this is ultimately, that's really what it comes down to. It's almost like a video game. It's almost like um, you get thrown into like so many different circumstances and situations in life, but how do you sort of remain good despite some of them maybe just sort of almost forcing you to be an asshole sometimes. And I think on a very simple level, I think that for now at least gives me a lot of meaning. And I've been thinking about sort of my own journey and thinking about the three, I think three things I would say, which are almost like they're traps as you kind of get on this journey. And so one of them, which I learned early on, is don't become the story. And I think what was happening in the start was there was this novelty, you know, you're veiled or whatever, and you're like doing all of this stuff. And so it wasn't anymore about what I was trying to do, and it really became about me. And at that time, I went with it because I thought, this is, you know, any attention is sort of, any publicity is good publicity. But I think what it increasingly did was I sort of started withdrawing into my shell because I didn't want it to be about me at all. And so that don't get trapped in the hype is definitely one thing. And I think when it comes to this, there are lots of sort of listicles and things online about, you know, 9 things to do or 10 things to do to find your meaning and find your purpose and whatever. I just think short term. I think just think about what really matters to you. I think it's maybe one of the special cases where what matters to you at that given point, and also what can you do at that given point with the resources that you have. Um, and I think just don't think about success. Don't think about whatever your action is has to be a grand thing that touches 10 million lives. It's just about a small change, a small thing you can do that kind of is sustainable. And the last thing is really to keep listening and to questioning and to challenging yourself. And it's easier said than done, but there's a lot of undoing you have to do as if you are seeking on this kind of deeper level. And you know, there was a couple of days ago, there was a thing I was watching on Netflix. I think it's called Sex and Love. Christiane Amanpour, it was one of the CNN series, and she was talking to people in, I think, Japan and China, and they were talking about how they don't, you know, like parents don't hug children. And it was like this ridiculous, outrageous thing that she simply couldn't wrap her head around. And it sounded a bit weird until I realized that actually, yeah, I mean, my parents never hugged me either. And then you just think about it and realize there's so many nuances as you deal with people who are so different and cultures that are different, that you have to keep challenging your own notion of what you understand something to be. So I think, and I don't think that this quest essentially ever ends. I think it's an ever changing thing, which is why I was a bit hesitant in the start with this talk, because it's almost very personal that it may or may not connect with someone else. Not everybody kind of goes on that sort of really deep, sort of deep end of trying to find meaning with everything. Sometimes it's just things you do. But one thing I've learned also is about keeping this and keeping my professional life separate, because you don't have to sort of leave a high flying job to like be in a village. You don't have to do that. You can do both. And I often find that the sort of day job gives me a routine and gives me things that are, you know, still interesting. I'm learning new things, but also gives me the financial freedom to go out and do stuff on, for example, weekends or after work hours. And so sometimes when you're feeling quite miserable in your day job, you know that you actually have another thing that is much more real, that gives you a deeper meaning, that is gives you a deeper joy that you can always kind of go back to. And yeah, I think, you know, I think it was Nietzsche who said that if you sort of have your why figured out, then the how sort of becomes easy. So you just kind of, it's trial and error. You sort of fix things, and yeah, just, you know, I think we've all read Viktor Frankl, and that led me to this piece of research that finding meaning is not necessarily about happiness. And yeah, it's an uncomfortable process, but it's really a personal thing, and it's about when you choose to engage with what you're doing. So that's basically it from my side. I'm not sure if there are any questions or what the format is, but I'd say this is very much a work in progress. And as I sort of go through it, maybe I think it also helps in articulating thoughts by sort of talking to others. So I mean, I hear Emil when he says, um, sometimes you have these morbid thoughts where you think about like, if something happens to me now, really, who's gonna care? Is it gonna be someone from work who they kind of pass a few condolence messages and then everybody forgets you literally the next hour because there's a really important meeting we need to get to? Or are these people who will kind of spend 5 more minutes sort of talking about your legacy, or sort of continuing and celebrating your life a little bit more? And I think eventually I feel I feel like you can just go how high and how far, and I think we all come back to that. I think ultimately we're just doing everything that we're doing because it's interesting, but um, because you also want to move somebody with the work that you're doing, or with just the person that you are. So thank you so much, guys, for listening, and thank you, Nikki, as well.
I have a thought or a question. I don't know either of it. When you talk about quest, it's kind of something that comes with searching or finding, and very often when I see people being in their mission, in their self, in their flow, it doesn't feel like a result of searching. And others very often are in this searching and say, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know how I can contribute. I don't know what's the meaning. And I feel like there is always somewhere searching. But those who are in that wasn't a result of searching.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say this. I struggle with the process. I struggle with the process very much. I mean, I can, I say 10, 15 years, the last, you look at the big picture to kind of come towards saying that something has a meaning. But it's been these 10, 15 years, I had no idea that I was searching for a meaning, or this is what meaning looks like. Um, I think, and I hope I'm answering, and please question me back if there's anything I've missed, but I think when you're in the process of searching for a meaning, you're actually not doing that. You're doing everything else. You're basically living life. And it's only towards the end when you find something that's meaningful, you can call it that. But I feel that it's not a conscious thing. It's sort of like talking to a single friend of mine saying, I'm looking for someone, and then you're so alert to it. But I keep telling her, I said, just don't. Like when you're not kind of consciously seeking that, like, could this be the one? Could this be the one? Could this be the one? Then it's sort of in those moments where you find something that makes the most sense. And it's a very personal thing. It depends on what matters to you. For me, a lot of it is like about integrity, honesty, being able to sleep in the night. Sometimes I come down to, there are certain decisions that you make, and then you sometimes question this, and they can be too idealistic for others. I mean, I was applying for a job, and then there was something from Facebook, and I'm like, should I, like, am I going to really be okay with that? And so I think it's just a journey of like your own sort of personal, like what matters to you, what helps you through like a given time.
9 people in the room. Maybe Emil and Johan can turn video on. By show of hands, who of you thinks that what you're doing is really meaningful? Okay, did I see 4 hands? Second question, like to us 4 maybe. Who of you thinks that more than 50% of your time spent is on the meaningful part, or let's say more than 30% of your time is on the meaningful part, and 70% of your time is actually with nothing that has to do with the meaningful part?
Do you guys, in the work that you do, is that meaning, or is that different from what you think is the idea of meaning for you?
Well, for me, it's easy because I think when I do my job right, it means something for people.
Yeah, but what does that mean something to you?
Yes.
Okay, so is there, I think this idea of that meaning should come from our work. I feel like I started with that, but I sort of got over that really quickly because I just realized that but I think it's also because my context was really working for education in, in a village and doing the TEDx and that kind of stuff. But is this a normal thing where a lot of people are driven by finding meaning through like their day jobs? Do a lot of you look for it?
I guess it depends what you define as your day job. I mean, I spend my time doing stuff which I love, which adds value to the people I work with. And I suppose I don't treat it like a job. I mean, I can't believe I make a living out of doing this thing which I love and which other people love. I can't, I mean, it's amazing. I love it. So I don't see it as a day job. I see it as an everyday, all the time calling to do things like this. So I don't quite understand the subtlety of the question. I can't differentiate.
No, that's actually a really great place to be at. I think I've sort of gone from having something like that, but completely transitioning to understanding that where I find meaning, I actually cannot get the financial freedom to do those things if I continued as well.
Oh, whereabouts are you in London?
Yes, I'm in East London, the other side
Ah,
of Wimbledon. Yeah.
I'm in Southwest.
Okay.
Maybe we should have a quiet talk at some point
Yes,
and
yes,
see
for
if we
sure.
can add some value
Yes, for
to
sure.
each other,
Yes,
which should be
for
fun.
sure.
Sorry, Nikki, we're taking over, and
That's okay. This is open.
that's what happens to Londoners, you see. But I'm. May I ask a question of
Sure.
you, Masarat? When you came to London, you were saying that because I don't see you as a person of color, I just see you as an ordinary person.
Okay.
Because I'm so used to this multicultural, multi-ethnic society we live in.
Yeah.
But seriously, did you
Yeah.
find
I,
something
yeah.
different?
So I, I find this really interesting because a lot of time, so I've, I mean, I'm trying to think of like, there are just so many incidents. I've had people um, stop me outside King's Cross station and like, I don't like what you wear because I wear the burqa and whatever. I don't like what you wear, or people coming up to me in coffee shops and like, how can you be a feminist if you wear this? And just approaching me in absolute public spaces, which really shocks me sometimes because I think um, can I just go up to a guy and say, I don't like your shirt? Like, he's probably going to just slap me or something. And I find this really interesting because it's often, um, it's okay. So I have to say this, it makes me a bit uncomfortable only when I realize that some of the things that I go through when I talk about it. I mean, I've had friends who've all said, oh, we can't believe like these kind of things happen in London. And then I kind of saw a pattern that they were mostly white men. And it was really interesting to see how people ask, well, does this really happen? And I was talking to someone on the tube, and she, said, well, I just thought this is just something that happens, people write about in newspapers, but it's not a real thing. Um, and it always fascinates me, but it's just such a lived experience. I mean, I came to a point where I thought I don't want to. I mean, if I choose not to, I don't need to wear the scarf or whatever, but I do it because I just realize how much do you conform to other people's ideas of how you need to be. And also, everybody can be really open-minded until you're just someone different, and then it just kind of really shows on them. And so for me, while London is better than the few other parts of the UK, but it is definitely there. Like it's one of the things I have to say I miss about Dubai. And every time I go there every couple of months to see my family, I just tell my friends, I just want to be out till really late. Like Dubai is a place I can be out at 4 a.m. and it's fine. I cannot do that in London. I most of the time do not go out after it gets dark. I just generally don't find it safe for me to go out till that late. And there's a lot of this kind of self-censorship that sort of comes with it. So it definitely happens. It's definitely not the completely safest as well. And yeah.
Do you think, sorry, excuse me, everybody, so I'm now going to try and defend London. Is that because you're in the east of London? Because I wouldn't go out at night in the east of London either. But the west and the southwest, so the center of London, no problem. The south, no problem. No, actually, the southeast, I wouldn't. Actually, anything east, I wouldn't. But
wait, can we maybe steer back from the geographical question to the quest of meaning? Because I really like that conversation. And you guys should go on a coffee.
We'll catch up separately on this.
We should, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious
sorry,
to
Nikki,
hear.
I'm
I'm curious to hear stories where your boundaries of surviving were, or your not boundaries, your needs of surviving stood in the way of the desire for meaning, like make money instead of doing something meaningful. I'm sure everyone has a story there. And Indra, you wanted to say something.
Yes, I wanted just to ask for Marcus. What can you say about Vilnius? Because I have also bad experience about colored people in Vilnius.
Wow, I think Vilnius is great.
But in Vilnius, I had a really nasty story.
No, you should talk to Masarat. Masarat, have you been to Vilnius?
No, I haven't.
Have you been to any of the sort of what we call Central European countries?
No, I haven't. I would actually avoid going there now. Like, we'll catch up on this conversation, but it's really interesting because there are places where I would want to, and there are places where I very unwillingly traveled to the US last year, which I'm glad I did go there. But it's really interesting. I think sometimes I think about how much we internalize certain things that we don't necessarily need to. And so part of this kind of white woman statement that I had made was, I often think about how much baggage we carry mentally that I feel like we have to undo. But in a lot of cultures that don't have that baggage, it is just absolutely amazing to see just people behave in a certain way, in the way that they are, that others don't have to do. And I find it really interesting, but also I find it sometimes really unfair. And I think a lot of like my kind of journey right now is just about, why is the burden of learning about nuances and things on us, as opposed to on, equally distributed among different people as well.
So Masarat, do you act differently? So let's say you were going to Austria. So we got 3 people here from Austria.
Yeah.
If you're going to go to Austria, would you think twice? Would you do a bit of research, or would you just get on the, I was going to say the plane?
That I would think twice about. Well, so I have a really fun story about this. So after Brexit, I traveled without any of my covering gear. Just because I almost had a horrible incident at Victoria Station, actually, a couple of days after the Brexit vote, where this guy coming at me almost on a packed station, just like with so much hate on his face, and in a moment when you think about these things, you think about like how you'll punch the guy and do all sorts of things, and I just froze. And he came so close, just like and I think I couldn't get over the hate on his face. But I don't know, something happened where he came so close to me, saw someone behind me and just turned and walked away. And then I was just really flustered. I was like, shit, do I get on the tube? Like, did he get on the tube? What the hell? And I turned back to see there was a Muslim guy who worked for TfL, the Transport for London Authority, who had a beard. And I mean, the guy was talking to someone else, but he looked at him and said, well, here's a Muslim. So he turned and walked off. And that's when I sort of realized, so when I go outside of London, especially for work, I had a lot of trips to like Norway and things. and a lot of early morning flights. So I don't cover. And so I think after 17, 18 years of actually sort of wearing the burqa and whatever, I traveled for the first time, and it was just a really bizarre experience because all of a sudden I was completely invisible. Like no one was giving me second looks or no one was acting uncomfortable, and that was such a strange thing for me because I'm very used to people just like oh shit, she's sitting next to us, oh shit. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. So I went to see a friend of mine who was in this little village on the outskirts of Munich and close to Austria, and we were just walking around, and I was wearing this at the time, and she was feeling a bit peckish. We entered a restaurant. I think it was like 4 o'clock or something. Apparently, it's when all sort of old white people have cake and tea. And I was completely oblivious to that. We sat there and I just realized they were gaping at me, just could not eat their cake because I was sitting there and they would not stop staring. And sometimes, you look at them and they turn their faces, they would not turn their faces. And so I'm like, don't eat, I'm gonna eat my food. I think when you're covered, I think it definitely takes, it still makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And I wouldn't think twice traveling anywhere. I enjoy traveling and I enjoy all of that, but I am very conscious that if I went in certain places covered, then I know it's not going to be like I won't feel the safest in those sort of places. Yeah. But I think it's all these experiences that sort of add. That's why I feel like this whole idea of meaning and the kind of philosophy behind it. I feel like when you have to do so much of this sort of mental labor of understanding things and so on, there's so many things I feel like I've thought about over the years, which a lot of people are only beginning to think now because of Trump. So this TED talk that I gave last year about the Muslim heroine's journey, I basically talk about this journey of transformation, and the first step of that is guilt. And that guilt is that every time there was a terrorist attack, people would sort of expect me to condemn. And like, I felt this deep guilt of like, shit, I need to apologize for something. And then, it goes on. But I feel in 2014, when I gave that TED talk, I mean, it was ridiculous because a lot of people just didn't get it. So, I mean, people didn't talk to me at all. This is TED. People didn't talk to me at all till like day 4 when I spoke. And after I spoke, I had people come up to me and said, oh, we weren't expecting you to be funny. Or like Nicholas Negroponte came to me and then he was like, I liked your talk. I just don't agree with this. And just like walks off. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks. Didn't ask for your opinion, but thank you very much. And this is the thing, right? Like I spend more time thinking about this stuff because there's my work and there's things I'm interested, but my identity means something as well. And it just doesn't mean something for me. It means a lot more to also the people who I'm connected with. For example, in the village, my sisters and I are one of the first girls to have gone to a university. So when they look at us, for many years, a lot of people have expected us to fail to kind of make examples out of us and say, that's why girls shouldn't go. But now the story has changed. And now with the TEDx work that we've done, in 2017, we had like 7,000 people and, attend. And in those 7,000, there were at least 3,500 women who are completely veiled, who normally don't even come out of their houses to go to their own children's schools, but they came for this. And I've had some really interesting conversations with them on robotics and just their understanding of it. And it was really interesting. They're like, if we have robots, why do we need men? And there were some really interesting conversations. And so there's, like I said, there's a lot of mental labor I feel I've had to do, which is, it makes my discussion on meaning very different from maybe some of you. And I won't be surprised if some people can't relate to it even as well, which, I think it's such a luxury sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, may I contribute something? Masarat, have you been to Hong Kong?
Oh, no, I came very close to it. My husband had to go alone. No, I didn't.
Yeah, this is a place, it used to be the safest place on earth. Okay, and you can wear whatever you like. Okay, and you are always welcome. I think Nikki knew that. Okay, but the world changed. While you guys talk about Eastern London, Western London, there is a locational issue. Okay, but now it's a, you have to put in the time domain. The safest place on earth all of a sudden become the battlefield, the financial, economic battlefield between the East and the West. Okay, and all of a sudden, a sanction, on the politician in Hong Kong happened that we had never think before. Okay, while we talk about, we have to unleash the potential of the development countries, even the well-developed place, because of the war, okay, is being destroyed or are seriously affected. I don't think that the Hong Kong will be the old Hong Kong, okay? It can never recover, with the same pace that, or maintain the development pace in the next 10 to 20 years, okay? The only hope that Hong Kong rebound, in my eyes at the moment, is China change the way or the mindset that the other people look into the communist China. Technically, it's not communist in my eyes at all. Okay, I'm from Hong Kong. I got brought up, in the British colonial era, and I still, when I was working in the German bank and I travel in Germany, Australia, Austria, I have the same feeling as you did. People ignore me, even though I dress well. But there are some people, some restaurant, they did not like a color people, to chef. And it's talking about 20-something years ago. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I brought students from Hong Kong because there are a lot of misunderstanding about the so-called communist country in China. I do not like the way how they run the country. But on the other hand, this very poor country become quite rich now, at least, some portion of it. So I want to bridge the people, okay? And I try to convince a local student who has a wrong or ill feeling about, communists, to bring them to China, to let them talk to the local people. That's what I'm going to do, is to try to bridge a different culture together. I do not add my own idea, and just let them talk, okay? Say a lot of Hong Kong youngsters, they do not want to use a TikTok, okay? Even though there are a lot of people, even Beckham has a TikTok channel, but they still do not like any Chinese software, like what Trump is doing now. They just want to ban all of them, which is really wrong in my eyes. We have to bridge them so that we have less war, any kind of war. So my opinion now is that because of a lot of historical issue, mankind has to compete, and sometimes there are many forms of animal. Only mans kill mans.
Yeah.
Don't you realize that?
I have to say,
so we got to stop this.
I have to say, you've reminded me of this. We can look at cultures and religions and kind of all sorts of grouping systems. And one of the most basic kind of, tool to create a narrative is victimhood. And I think it's the kind of most dangerous form of storytelling, or something that people tend to believe in when they kind of believe their victim's story. And one of the things, which is why even talking about this whole burqa thing, or starting question with what Marcus asked me, I just don't want to frame any of this narrative as like boohoo, look at what is happening to us. But it is about, how do I change this? So I have huge empathy now, actually, with people who are who've fallen through like the cracks of the system, who are, just completely different in many different ways, or maybe members of the LGBT community, for example, and so on. Huge empathy for people just trying to kind of make their own space in all of this. And like you said, you have to come together beyond the victimhood sort of narrative to kind of move past.
Totally agree.
And we're all different.
Totally
I mean, we're 5 siblings, and we are as different as five of us can be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have absolutely no expectation that someone else needs to do things my way. And I think it is such a basic thing, but I often find it that people just don't get it. Like they maybe understand the concept, but don't actually practice it. So
And
yeah,
they do not realize they are doing that. That's
yeah.
the issue. They
Which
are
is
doing
why,
it,
you know,
but they act, yeah.
which is why I say you have to keep challenging yourself, your notions of whatever that you believe in. I mean, it's not like a one-time thing. You have to sort of keep kind of questioning yourself the whole time as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
Are we out of time, Nikki? Sorry, are you on mute? Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
I'm
mute.
sorry.
You're on mute.
We're good. We're good. Yeah, I'm muting myself because I'm living close to a church, and then it goes very Catholic.
Okay. The bells are gonna ring.
Um,
You guys,
Masarat, you started off by asking us if we felt we had meaning.
yeah.
In what we do, and you were. Do you think you have meaning in what you do?
So I think from where I'm right now, I don't think I'm completely there, but I definitely know it's linked to the village. I've been doing a lot of things the last 10 years in trying to get more girls to go to school, and that is happening. But I'm still sitting on this idea of I need to do something a little bit bigger, a little bit more kind of ambitious in giving support to all of these girls who are now going to schools, and a lot of them are first people in their entire generation to get an education, and that's not enough. You need to support them as well with other opportunities and a lot of other things. And so, you know, I'm not there, but I kind of have an idea of where I need to go, and which is why, you know, I'm completely, what I do now is I do my work, which is interesting in its own, but I don't take it seriously in the sense, you know, if there are whatever little politics here and there, I just sort of shrug it off, because for me the deeper thing that gives me meaning is this as well. And yeah, so I'm not there, but I think I do have an idea with where I want to go with it.
Another question in the room: who of you is currently in a self-transformation?
Go on, tell us more.
Martin.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think it's depending on what I'm doing now in the company. And I see it's quite difficult to come forward on with the ideas. So because the whole environment is Corinthian-like, I would say, but not international. So the question is, what can I do now in this moment? And it's also difficult to bring in new ideas, and so I'm thinking it's have to do something with me, and I don't know how to transform what I see otherwise or something here on the tour to transfer it back in the region. So, and the question is, how can I transfer myself to be a better translator between these two worlds? But I have no idea in the moment how to do it.
I mean, I don't want to appear to be like the know-it-all person who like tells people what to do. I think sometimes it's completely okay for us to sort of sit, you know, with our questions. I usually have a diary that I keep right sort of next to my bed. And it's always at crazy hours of the night that I just like sit and write certain things and ideas and things. So it's perfectly okay to sort of have these questions and sort of sit with them.
No.
So related to the fact that I moved to Denmark 3 years ago, and it was a chance to start over personally, but also professionally. So that's actually how I decided to take on speaker coaching full time and say, yes, I want to help these people express themselves in the way that they want to express themselves. So in addition to that, there's a lot of exposure around me at the moment to people who do diversity and inclusion work, particularly through TEDx and through the startups that I work with. And it's making me question things like, for example, have I ever been discriminated? Because I honestly don't know. I'm either oblivious to it or very privileged. So I've been thinking a lot about things like that. I mean, coming from Romania, chances are that, yes, I have been. And I mean, not to say that Denmark is a perfect society at the moment at all. And there are a lot of questions that I'm asking myself and that I'm kind of reflecting back and forth with the people that I work with. So it's actually quite interesting to follow this discussion now as well. Yeah. But I have to say that I find a lot of the conversations in Denmark, at least, to be quite loaded. So there's rarely this position of acceptance, even between people who do diversity and inclusion work. It's very difficult for people to keep their personal feelings in a conversational and a friendly tone. So very often the debates become quite, militant, but in a negative sense, militant. So maybe for me, the meaning that I'm looking for at the moment is how to let each other be and allow space for everybody to just exist the way that they want to exist without super politicizing everything. But I haven't quite found the way to that, because everything is political, so long as we live in society. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm dealing with.
I started a digital detox early this month, and I just uninstalled Twitter and Facebook as well. And I just felt people were so angry, and there's just everyone talking over each other, everyone being way too woke for like what's today's wokeness, and I can't catch up. And so I just thought. And I think this is one thing I have to say, I found a diary I used to write in between 2008 and 10, and I was reading sort of all my ideas and whatever, and I thought the one difference is that over the years, when you get caught up in like this hype of social media and just really being this intellectual on there, is you stop doing. And I started realizing I live so much in my head with the arguments and things and whatever on Twitter and everything else, that I realized that actually at the end of the day, you feel like you've done a lot of work, but you have nothing to show for it. And that's when I sort of decided I needed to take this month off to see how much of one do I miss? What do I, you get used to getting all your news and getting all the anger updates and everything else. And I think that has just now opened up my time to blog, to kind of communicate in a more meaningful way. So I call it the WhatsApp voice note podcasts. I send 15-minute long voice notes to like random friends. I sometimes haven't spoken to them in months or anything, but I find that this a useless way of conversation is just connecting with people and just telling them, oh, how are you? I mean, everyone's going to tell you fine. No one's going to tell you anything. But I send them a note, and I just, you kind of open up with your vulnerabilities and the questions or things that you're struggling with. So I don't go through like the little, like, how's your husband, whatever, don't care for any of that. I just kind of jump into like, these are questions I'm thinking about, what are, blah, blah, blah. And it just, it's just a lot of kind of short, meaningful nuggets of like voice notes every now and then that I just kind of drop into without expecting a response or whatever. And I always find them so much more meaningful, because I think it's very unrealistic to be connected to like 100 no, forget 100, like 700-800 people or 1,000 people at the same time through LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and Insta and blah, 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 all of them. There's nothing meaningful that comes out of it. And I find a lot of regret actually coming in if like someone passes away and you sort of realize that I did not have anything meaningful in a conversation with them in a while. So I don't know, I've been thinking about it from this kind of very morbidity point of view as well. The last couple of months, I've had few close people like pass away. So I think ultimately, maybe it's a cultural thing, but it just reminds you, brings you back to like what really matters when you think about stuff. Sometimes you worry about things and then you're like, does it actually matter? So yeah, I hope you find your community.
And I don't know how you feel about it. So, I mean, my life has changed insanely. Like I was a father of 3 children a year ago. Now I have one son talking to me. I did tours in Silicon Valley. Now everything is virtual. And a week ago, I lost my voice and I'm giving talks all the time. So it's kind of a lot of puzzle pieces I'm looking from the other side and twisting and turning them around. And the more these things are happening to my life, the more I actually realize that I managed to get out of my head. The more I had like, things are pretty smooth and you just consider what's the next version of myself. I found myself being so much in my head that I didn't move on.
Yeah.
But now that our things are going so crazy, I actually really managed to get out of my head. And it feels good.
Yeah. It's making me write more, I have to say. I think that's what it's kind of making me do. Yeah, for sure.
Beautiful hour. Thank you so much, Masarat.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was really nice connecting with all of you. And yeah, see you guys around. And happy, my email is my first name @gmail.com. And so yeah, happy to connect with you guys as well.
And I'll connect you all anyways.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a great
Thanks so much.
day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Masarat.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Nikki, for the invitation.